go around and introduce ourselves because we all have a lot of new faces. I'm Howard Hansen.
Jason Mason.
Sandy Wisniewski.
Tiffany Millen.
Nancy Baird.
Danny Clark.
I'm Dan Schmidt with MSA.
I'm Adam Sonntag, City Administrator.
I want to thank the new board members for giving of your time. And you've come on an exciting time as we're moving forward in leaps and bounds. So, take a moment to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, let's get rocking with the presentation.
All right.
Any introduction? Or you want me to just
Thank you all. This has been a long time, so thanks for coming to a special meeting. It's kind of off schedule again, but we wanted to get this in front of you. Just to give everybody kind of a background that hasn't been in from the start here. Earlier this year, the city put out a request to do master planning for parks. The focus on that was primarily for 4 parks, Barlow, Ceresco, Horner, and then also Selfridge. So those were kind of the main focuses. We have since kind of lumped in Murray Park to do some more comprehensive reviews and surveying as well with it. So it's far more, it's a pretty big undertaking. It's the first master planning effort that's been undertaken for some time.
Since the 80s.
So we went through that process and we hired MSA. They also do a lot of our city engineering work to come in and help put together this plan. So where we are at today is we have gone through a couple things. The first was a public survey. So this committee met in June and went through that survey and then issued it to the public. We had around 300 some responses. I did forward that out to you. In that time as well, as we started to digest that, we did have a stakeholder meeting about 10-15 days ago where we invited some people who use our parks, targeted to baseball clubs, school district, Ripon Medical, Ripon College, Kiwanis, American Legion, Boys and Girls Club. We just reached out to them and said, hey, come in and look at this to just see where we're headed. And the real goal there was to engage them earlier on in the process because frankly, with what we saw in the survey results and just the general condition of the parks where we are at right now, we are going to need their help and build partnerships. So the last thing that, frankly, going through the process that staff wanted to do and that MSA, I believe, wanted to do was come out to the public with just this plan that here, we did this. So, and not giving an opportunity for people to engage and buy into this early on because in the feedback we got will be shared tonight too. So you are getting a point where we have vetted this, not, to the point where we've had open houses for the general public, but we've had 300 surveys. We've had a good number of community groups come in, look at it. It was a very it was a very open meeting. We got chewed out a little bit, which is fine. We'll take it. Dan and another Dan from MSA helped lead it. There were boards. People just kind of gave notes and said this is what we'd like to see, but it was I think a very important step that we had to add at this point because of some of the projects and the challenges we face. So with that, I turn it over to Dan. If you have any questions, certainly happy to answer from my perspective, but Dan has sort of a PowerPoint. You also did receive the PowerPoint. You received all 80 pages of a response to the survey, so if you had a chance to read that, you probably got some honest feedback from the public. And then I think this will just sort of go through some of that and then kind of get into some concepts and have you review it and see what you like, what you don't like, and we'll continue to move this forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam.
Yep.
And so, thanks everyone for having me out tonight. Again, my name is Dan Schmidt. I'm a landscape architect with MSA. One of my main roles there is park planning. So we do projects like this across the upper Midwest, helping communities kind of vision and enhance their park spaces and really hone in on the opportunities and assets that exist to help implement these projects going forward. I don't need to spend too much time on the meeting goals, but we just wanted to go a little bit of the planning process. We'll review some of the survey feedback on the parks, and then hopefully by the end kind of just get a better feel for your understanding of the needs and future concerns that this group has for different parks. We went through this with the stakeholders as well, and you guys this group in general is probably familiar since you put out the RFP to have MSA come, but the master plan we like to go through is a framework. It's not meant and is not a set of construction drawings or any type of hard document that assigns any requirement for the city to implement the plans as they're shown, but it provides a backdrop and a planning framework and a goal that's been coalesced around by the community, by different stakeholders, on a vision for what the community wants to go forward with. And ultimately, we'll end up with a narrative, cost estimates, graphics, and visuals of a scaled plan that is something that could be built, and the goal will be to build that, but these types of planning efforts take time, and through that phasing, the community's goals and needs may change, and these plans can be flexible to accommodate that as you're gearing towards implementation and spending the money to get the stuff in the ground. So going through some of the survey results, Adam did share the full comments with you. If you have anything in particular, we can go through those. Otherwise, I was going to highlight just kind of the key elements that were the key things that were used and desired at the different parks. So Selfridge Park, the most common responses of the elements that activities respondents used for the playground, shelters, and fishing areas. The open space areas for walking came in there as well. And then of the elements that were listed for desired improvements or amenities, canoe kayak launch, waterfront trails, viewing areas, site furnishings, drinking fountain, other site amenities, playground were some of the top elements on replies back as far as things people would like to see at Selfridge. Barlow Park, fairly similar. Playground, shelter, walking and running trails are the most used features. And then adding in for that site furnishings, so things that make the parks more usable, benches, tables, bike racks, things like that, that make the spaces just inherently more usable. Drinking fountains and access to restrooms in general. And then playground and natural play are separated out, but essentially the same idea. It's a place for recreational play. And this one should say Murray Park. Murray Park, most used elements, baseball and softball fields, playground, open space, shelters, walking and running trails. And then similar to the other parks, site furnishings, drinking fountain, playgrounds were some of the highest elements to be added into the park. The rest go as well. Playground equipment was by far the highest there of the existing activities. And again, updating and improving playground equipment, whether it's natural play or regular, and then improved site amenities were the higher kidding responses. And Horner Park, open space, fishing, top getters, and then potential options would be gazebo, walking trail, site furnishings, naturalized landscaping, so a little more passive uses than the other parks, but still good responses overall. And this slide is just a summary of those kind of things. So looking at the different elements and things that kind of, you can see the things that go throughout the opportunities to engage within the parks, benches and tables and things. You can have a picnic and spend more time there. Have those placed well so they're accessible. Can kayak launch and ways to access water at the parks that have that feature. So Selfridge in particular. Murray Park, new playground equipment, upgrading, improvements to the ball fields kind of showed up in some of the comments as well, not necessarily on this list. Disc golf and maintenance and bringing that back around after the construction of the senior center. In Barlow Park, improved basketball courts, landscaping, some of the main comments there. So with that survey results, MSA as a team came together and did an internal charrette kind of mini design process just to come up with some ideas to start to visualize what some of these ideas could be. And the concepts that we came up with were meant to be discussion holders or placeholders for upcoming meetings, stakeholder meeting in this group. So taking our interpretation and any city comments or city staff comments that we had gotten and really setting up a room for discussion so that wasn't just a blank slate, so that people weren't calling out, well, we want a swimming pool here, and trying to keep the discussions a bit more tailored to what's feasible and what's likely for the parks, but still allowing people to throw ideas out there. I mean, we're at a stage where we're brainstorming. We don't want to exclude an idea just because it may be unusual if it's something that the community really wants and is feasible in that park. So going through the stakeholder group and feedback we get tonight and any other comments we get will be refined into the next concept revisions, and then those would be the ones that would go forward more to open public meetings and as we wrap up the project. So Barlow Park, we'll start off there, and I think at this point, feel free if there's particular comments or questions or things you want to interject with. I think it's perfectly fine to do that as we go through.
Yes. Let us have it.
So, and then as we go through this, I'll also kind of relay some of the comments that we heard was about a week and a half ago at the stakeholder meeting as well. Some proposed park features at Barlow. I think the direction we received from staff, interest in the survey, is maintaining the ball fields, at least the main baseball field is important. Restructuring how people move around the park could be improved, both for a day-to-day use as well as for larger events. So you'll see kind of that dark gray is proposed kind of trail or service drive type access. So moving parking, more formal parking a little bit further north in the site, closer to the existing park shelter, to kind of help define that area of the park and keep cars out of a section of the park, but also maintaining access, knowing that when you have games and events, you'll want to get stuff down in the concessions building, so making sure that that route is still something that could be driven on for maintenance and access during other events. The integration of the larger playground at the border there comes out of some initial discussion and comments on potential partnership with the schools, and after the meeting last week, really piqued some interest with the two representatives that we had from the school district, and looking at ways that the southern boundary between the school and the park could become more porous and not such a hard fenced line, kind of sharing the spaces between the two, allowing some of the playground features to come into the park side, and then potentially baseball or a softball field to kind of encroach on the other side into kind of underutilized school space. On the north side of the park itself, looking at upgrading basketball courts, maybe possibly taking one away and moving into a more formal skate park at Barlow to kind of manage and allow for traffic and more viewership, pulling out of Selfridge from an aspect of a little more passive rec there versus some of the features. So it seemed to be something that fits more here, but certainly as you look to go through these plans, I mean, there's nothing saying that Selfridge Skate Park has to go away if there's neighbors or the Boys and Girls Club start to use it and it becomes desired, it could stay. But a more formal and involved feature here that kind of starts to really bring in that character, something like the image that's shown there. Baseball field itself, kind of turning that into a little bit more of a stadium, something that honors the players and the use, not like a minor league field, but nicer fencing, bigger bleachers, better concessions, and or press box, things like that to draw up that amenity, create a little bit more improved field. Maintaining the existing pavilion, likely adding some upgrades to that. Adding a pavilion to the south near the playground and what format that takes to provide a place for shade and or picnics or parties or things as you're going to work with groups. General improvement on trails, so the dash line, the start of a trail network that kind of goes through the park so that you can get from the north side to the south side without walking on what might be driveway. But just also create a different level of use. So you just want to walk on a nice path. Maintain as much of the woodland as possible. And kind of keeping that as great character to the park, but also a nice buffer to the surrounding homes. And the open green space on the north side just create kind of a character to the park. So being able to use that for different passive or active rec purposes, having some kind of unprogrammed green spaces is always a nice feature in a park.
So the pavilion that's down here where that volleyball thing is would be gone? It says proposed building. So you would take that bigger one down and
Replacement of the existing concessions and shelter on the south side. Those restrooms have kind of gone past their useful life, aren't accessible anymore, or aren't accessible, and likely would need to be remodeled anyhow. So looking at the possibility, and the groups varied a little bit in our responses on whether softball or baseball would be a potential second option between the groups that Dan Rammer and I led at the stakeholder meeting, but there was interest in that possibility. And within that, the school kind of mentioned that area, that northwestern section of the school grounds is underutilized, generally speaking, as far as programming. So if that was to become more porous and you wanted to fit a larger ball field, which some felt was necessary, others thought, hey, if we're upgrading the baseball field, we should have something similar in quality for softball. So we're looking at equity and that between
Softball wise, up in that area
between
is a
sports.
good idea. I'm speaking as a baseball coach, and we don't need another full-size baseball field in town.
Yeah.
We have 3 for this community. We have the college, we have Barlow, and we have the JV Memorial at the high school.
Yeah.
With as few participants as there is in summer rec baseball in that more than covers our needs.
Yeah.
And the college is always willing to let us use their field if we need for something, so.
Yeah.
But a softball field up in that area is something we had talked about for years.
Yeah.
Because it would be nice to have a field where the varsity baseball and the varsity softball could play in the same complex, basically, so.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the general idea, and the plan shows it fits in there, and that orientation is usually the best if you're trying to maximize efficiency of the different facilities. You could flip the softball field 180 degrees or mirror it, be a little less intensive to install based on the grades, but you lose some of the efficiencies of being able to keep a central concession stand and that between the two.
Yeah. And a lot of the things though is that softball and baseball don't always play on the same day with high school scheduling, the way it is.
Yep.
It's usually one's on the road and the other. We originally had thought about the softball field being over where you have the proposed pavilion, which would have been on the east side of the loop up there, to kind of keep that spacing in there. And we were looking at still utilizing the current facility that's up there for shelter and the storage unit that's there, which is also the announcers and concession stand. But you know, you're proposing a possible road around that area, There's not a lot of room through there.
Yeah, well, the ball field would have to move to the east a bit with this.
Just so you know, there's irrigation up there underneath that ball field. So that would be affected also.
And that would be, I mean, the intent would be that would be a 10 or 12 foot wide drive lane access that if you need to get maintenance around. Not a
Yeah,
full-
right now it's 5 foot from the bleachers to the,
Yep, it's,
fence.
it's tight back there, so.
I had a concern. I had a question. The proposed playground for the natural play area, there's a pavilion. Would there be consideration for parking over there? It's kind of a little far drive.
Yeah, I think there certainly could be. I think leveraging some of the school side too during non-school hours would be a possibility, and I think something that was brought up during some of the comments is being able to kind of share some of that space, but I think bringing a couple stalls down there probably wouldn't be completely out of the question, or some type of better access for users, so it isn't quite as far. And
Do you have a proposed number of stalls, spots at the parking lot there?
I don't know if we've done official takeoff on how many would be there. My guess is we're probably
Probably not enough ever.
right now for baseball, people park on the grass around the field, the outfield and that, so, I mean, I don't think, ever see that going away.
no, and I
That's
think
been a tradition.
as you look
Forever.
into future improvements, making sure that grading, soil conditions and all that are put in a way that you're making that as least impactful on the site, so when you do have cars out there occasionally, that it works out, and it generally seems to work out pretty well now.
I think the parking thing is a big struggle at both major parks here, and here we're trying to maximize a little bit more to that, to the what is that, the south side of the park? Is that or north side of the park, sorry, where the existing shelter is right now. There's very little parking there. So you'd be adding that whole area for parking. And then you could certainly extend that proposed overflow parking significantly. You're also losing the entire loop. And, so that people park on that, I know right now. So that might push people more back toward Griswold. But then if you have nice trails, you can at least, So I hate the parking complaints. We hear them. It's tough to plan all this out for the couple times a year where we need so much parking, because it is very costly. But we understand that, these areas can be tweaked a little bit to expand that at minimal cost, and it make a ultimate great benefit when there's something big going on, so.
Good. I know right now they park, that lower section of the volleyball courts out there, that can fit about 6 cars in that spot.
But I think ultimately, we would be formalizing a parking plan with this and saying this is how many spots we would try to get to, but, the right weekend, you're never gonna have enough.
I think there's a cool small town feel to parking on the grass that,
Well, if you build a lot, they'll park there anyways too. Right?
Yeah.
So they'll find a way to go.
Yeah.
So,
When you're waiting 2 cars deep for that one parking stall, you'll find a spot. And when you do things like laying out trails in relationship to other paths, making sure they're deep enough that you have room so a car could pull off that drive lane, and you could angle park cars in there, and looking at that kind of thing as pieces that would go into the master plan and future design, so that you do have that flexibility for bigger events, just to utilize that green space as well.
If you drive past Barlow Park right now, there's going to be 35 kids and 20 adults, right? And they're all parking on the street. So I think there is something to the parking, the access, or like where people for the playground, because that's where families are right now, is at that playground area. So whether that's parking on the grass or finding some sort of parking idea that's not so far away from that proposed playground area is definitely something to consider.
And I think the purpose of this too is that front playground that's existing would be to remove that.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. Would there be two of them or there just to be one?
The whole, and this gets back to, when we started this process, the school did reach out and say, we want to expand our park up there and onto the city park, and we want a natural area, but we also have facilities, you know, and this happens, look at, two of our parks are right next to schools. You know, if we are able, this whole concept kind of from the ball diamond south is kind of a shared concept with the school district, where, you know, frankly, there's a varsity baseball diamond and a varsity softball diamond and a shared playground. And it is a little bit more distance from Griswold. It is a little bit bigger of a walk. So yes, the parking is definitely an issue, but it doesn't make sense for the city to spend $150,000 on a brand new playground a block away from the school who needs to spend $150,000 on a new playground when we could maybe combine resources and buy a really nice $250,000 playground, you know? And that's the whole concept.
And you've got the parking in the school back up in that area, so it's not really that you'd be walking all the way from the front loop back there.
With the trails, you have the whole parking lot on that, so at Barlow Park Elementary too.
Right, you drive around to the back side of Barlow Park, and there's a parking lot right there. It's not that far to walk, so. You have the natural play area in that. How much of that is ADA accessible?
Generally, they can be designed to be, say, 90% of the natural play area accessible. I think the school district is working with a group out of Milwaukee called GRG Playscapes, and that's what they specialize in, is kind of wood-based natural structures utilizing those materials, and they tie it into accessible ground materials of either engineered wood fiber or other types of surfacing, and still have some of that loose play and some of that character too. So utilizing, and I think this shows it more to the west. There'd probably be, I think, some interest from the school side on kind of utilizing some of the understory space in the woodland too, to bring that in, so you feel like you're in a canopy or kind of starting to feel like a tree house almost.
Bring it more to the southeast corner of the.
Yeah, so I think that's what they had in mind. So that would be the one, I think, feedback, kind of this little bubble I drew on here is maybe pulling that around a little bit, which maybe opens us up for maybe a smaller turnaround if you do want to have some type of access for times when school's in session and you can't use that lot, or other purposes. It can be the type of thing too that could be bollarded off at times, so when you don't want to have cars coming through the park, you turn it more into just a trail. There's different ways to leverage that type of access.
And so what we're losing here in this is the playground to the north. We'd shrink down the basketball courts. We would add a skate park. The skate park would be removed from Selfridge. The idea of the skate park in Barlow versus Selfridge is because of the nature of Selfridge's park, which you'll see later, and the visibility of the skate park in a setting like this versus being tucked away in somewhere where it isn't visible or seen. Obviously the skate park gets a kind of a bad rap for where it is, but if you look at the condition of Selfridge, there's a reason for that. And frankly, the conversations with the school and whatnot are trying to engage kids to inherit this as their area and their project, because the current site is just, it's not visible. Of course, there's going to be thoughts of bad activity there when you've just stuck it in a place where it doesn't fit. This has a neighborhood. I get it. There's always going to be kids running around, right? Like it's always going to be kind of that with skating and whatnot. That whole,
it's an active sport.
Yeah, it's
when you I don't want to say take the time to honor it, but when you put it out front and make it feel important, you tend to see better results and less.
Well, the reason the skate park is where it's at is a little over 20 years ago when the group came to us, approached us, that's where they wanted it. So that's where it was put there. wasn't our first thought. Our first thought was Barlow Park. But, you know, we wanted to appease the group that came to us, so it's good that you're looking at moving it.
It's just, it's something that we, you know, it's got to fit somewhere better. But then as you move into the park, you know, some of the shelters, some of the things would be moved around, and then you'd lose volleyball courts, you know, so, but I don't know how actively used those currently are.
Well, there's only one court up there that's used right now. We went through and redid that a couple years ago where we dug it out, put in soft sand, and then just did the center court. There is an outdoor group that uses it during the summer. Because there is no other outdoor volleyball courts in town.
So we would lose that.
Right.
Yeah. I know with some of the modifications, we pulled the playground a little bit further away.
I was gonna say, have you moved the playground to the Newberry area, that possibly could stay,
I like that idea better.
you know?
I don't like it so tucked back to the school because it feels like it removes it from the neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, but I would say right now that current park needs to quadruple in size. It is way undersized, and that's, we do not have the space other than going to the open Half Moon. We don't have the space on the other side of the park really to put a park that's, you know, I mean, I live on the south side, so Barlow's my park. You go there on the wrong night, and you can have 10 kids, and the park is, the playground's full. I mean, it's not big enough. So the school, if we can do a natural playground next to an accessible playground and get a giant area, that is sort of the vision behind that, and the school is really willing, I think, to partner with us on that effort. So, yeah, it's a little bit longer of a walk, and
Does the school plan on upgrading what they currently have at the same time?
they would love to expand. So they have, like, back tucked behind there, they have the natural play area that they installed, like, I don't know, like 5-10 years ago or so. They want to, like, quadruple the size of that because kids love it, and they don't have the room. On top of, then they're in the same boat sort of with their playground equipment on the site, getting to the point where it needs to be addressed.
Yep.
So, you know, I met with them and talked with them about how we accomplished that, because I'm like, yeah, you know, I get it. You're sort of opening the gate now because you have the gate there and you don't want kids just running everywhere, but they're like, we'll deal with that because we want this. Like,
Yeah.
they really are motivated, and from the standpoint of money and partnerships, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to do a small park up front there and keep something there. Most of the things there are probably at end of life condition, and you know, but really that becomes a giant, just open, awesome area, I feel, and I think most kids will want to go there anyway if we do anything else anywhere else, you know. But I don't know.
So is the plan that the school would remove what they have now and it would just be a shared playground with this new playground?
Yeah, I think that would be sort of the concept.
Okay.
Is you know, either keep what they have and expand out into the park,
Okay.
and take down the fences and sort of work with the city, come to some agreements on this stuff. Or, you know, or the alternative is go big and, you know, let's take out the loop and let's go. Like, you know, let's build a big playground. So, I mean, those decisions and those, you know, agreements have to still come. But there's significant interest to expand and work with the city on that from them, so.
Where will the bathrooms and the drinking fountains be located around the park?
Wherever we want to put them.
I
That's great.
I'm just throwing in drinking fountains and water bottle
Yeah.
stations that are really important for the kids.
Yeah, I would suspect you'd probably look at remodeling and upgrading the restrooms in the existing shelter and keeping that, since it's close to your basketball court, skate park, as one key element. And then probably, depending on exactly where the placement and location of the southern building or concessions stand would be another one, and somehow tying that into making sure it's close and visible enough to the playground that kids can run back and forth between there. One comment we did hear from some of the groups with this and Murray Park is keeping the playgrounds close to the ball fields is helpful for.
That's why we have the one up there right now. That was our
You
original
have
plan.
events. More so
Added that.
at Murray when you have larger tournaments and things where you're there, but even if you're there for an hour, 2 hours, it's nice to allow the younger ones to go play and not be sitting there going, Mom, Dad. So we're getting used to at home. So it's the other reason to have something down there, and I think Adam said, you could keep something small up front. Certainly, I mean, in the phasing of this, I would assume more than likely it's not going to be a come in and blanketly redo everything at once. It'll be done in phases, picking the most important or the areas that whether there's donations or partnerships. So natural playground, I think the school has funds to do it next year in 23, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe.
If it's okay and everything goes through. So I mean, those types of things can go forward. Keeping the playground on the north side, maybe that stays important, and the neighbors want it, and maybe it stays a little longer, and then gets replaced with something in a number of years when it's ready to go as the plan is built out. So those are the types of pieces the master plan too can be
Because the
can be
playground
flexible.
equipment we have up behind the ball field right now, the concession stand up there, is not that old.
No, that's, yeah.
So that we definitely need to be looking at, and that might be something that gets relocated to
Yep.
the Griswold Street area so that can still be utilized. Adam, I ask you from a city standpoint, how important do you feel it is to be able to drive all the way around the ball field? Because
It just comes down to what we put back there,
Yeah,
you know,
'cause-
like,
you get traffic looping around that during a game, and there's
I think it would be generally a maintenance way during activities and during use, you know.
sort of like we have right now. You can
Yep.
get all the way
Yep.
to there on the south side, but not from the west side.
I feel that it's important to be able to drive around back there if we need to do something.
That's what I was asking.
You know, like,
Right now,
But-
there's only about 40 feet that you can't.
I don't
drive
want
a
people
vehicle
driving in and having to back all the way out, you know, like if they can't get through, you know, so.
Okay, I'm just asking from
Yeah,
your
no,
point of view.
But the concern can be easily mitigated with a gate or something.
Gate ballers, there's a lot of different ways. Chain gates, ballers, is kind of ways you can control that and to when you want to have it.
So with the baseball field, you're actually looking at building a whole new field. That's your proposal?
Well, something.
I'd say the pie in the sky version could be that as something maintaining, a majority of the existing surface, but shifting it over a little bit, adding some larger bleachers and creating a little bit more grand.
Bleachers that are there are pretty large, if you went up there and looked at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Newer bleachers maybe.
the whole concept would be to have a hybrid, not like a college stadium vibe, but like, you know, with netting and,
Yep.
you know, there's
A little
just
more updated.
little updated, you know, backstops. And yeah, I would love to see something bigger, you know, for our student athletes and you know, I mean, at one point we were winning state championships, right? Like,
We already have.
yeah.
We got more coming.
Yeah, exactly. But
My only concern on that was, the cost of it. We have the lights there now, we've got the wiring, we've got the irrigation system, it's going to be costly.
Yeah.
And that's my only concern, spending the dollars on something like that versus some other needs when it is a viable and practical field right now for the 3 months out of the year that it's actually really used.
But I will just say that from the standpoint of this plan, having a goal of doing something nicer is very important because
Oh, yes, I agree.
our facilities are declining significantly and are definitely worse than Grafton's. That's Grafton's stadium.
Yeah. Oh, that looks just like Kewaskum's behind their high school.
Some of the other pieces too with this is that could be the 20-year mark. It's-
Yeah, no, I just
Serve the ball field till
Hey,
those
maybe
lights
we
and
get
those
a
features are used
semi-pro
up.
team. Like, come on.
trying to win the lottery. You know?
Hey,
It's just not cooperating.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good feedback there. Let's see. I think we covered most of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the general pieces, things that don't show up in these concepts yet, but will be marked. At least generally, it'll be things like lighting, bench pads, and placement of those features. Just at this high level, kind of conceptual, schematic level, don't show up, but will be part of kind of what starts to show now as you build in past where you put benches strategically so that the resting points would also offer a place to view, whether it's playground or sit in the outfield and watch baseball, things like that. So the next versions you'll see will have some more of those details flushed out within them.
This isn't a final. This is just a concept.
Yeah, these really
Looking for some feedback.
were intended to get people talking, and
Yep.
whether that was we hate this, we want something different, which
Or, hey, you like this?
that's fine, or like it. And for the most part, people were like the vision, but I think as we heard some tweaks to things to make it a little bit more Ripon and more usable or to the local residents might make sense. So before I move on, any other comments or questions or thoughts?
if you have anything too, you can always just email me and say, hey, because this is a lot to digest and we don't want to be here till 9:30 tonight, so. Right? Jason, you do?
I got an open schedule, I'm ready.
I'm good.
He's got pizza coming in 20 minutes.
All right.
Okay, we'll go on Selfridge. Existing conditions are declining. I mean, it's got some of the features, and I think a good majority of the existing character of what's proposed. Shelter space, somewhat of a path network, and the idea to focus and utilize the water resources in some way exists now in the skate park and some of the open space. I think looking at ways to improve trail network to get people closer to the water in ways that's accessible and functional. So both creating those types of paths, they're somewhat costly, but they provide a good, safe route for people to get around, things that are easy to maintain long-term, and also can start to play into some of the public safety piece that is sometimes brought up in the discussions and in some of the survey pieces. So being able to kind of create that loop so that if you're looking at things like police review and presence, they can drive by, see the things. You have, jumping a little bit quicker, I guess, strategically placed lighting so that it's at key points in the path. You don't need to light it up like a Christmas tree to make it safe, but make sure that your restrooms are facing towards the roadside, that you have intersections lit up, even in the trail network, and just kind of key places that are also useful for wayfinding. If you find yourself out there on a later evening in the fall, it gets dark early. So if you're out watching some birds playing on the lake, whatever, allows you to get back more safely. And extend the use too. I mean, it's the summer when it's open and light till 9:30, it might not be as important, but in the fall, if you're out walking a dog or taking a kid in the stroller, can certainly be nice to have just a little bit of light to make it keep open. Formalizing some of the parking and access, so if you're going to look at things like kayak launch and other more formal improvements on water access, making sure that there's some formality to those amenities as well. So if you have 10 or 15 people who are going to put a boat in on a weekend, that there's amenities that go along with that, restrooms, some parking and access, or fishing for that matter too, kind of go hand in hand when you start looking at different ways to access the water. Kayak launch can go anything from simple steps, stone steps off the shoreline, part of the riprap and protection, to more formal piers and launches. So there's different ways to introduce the community to that as far as accessibility and cost. Certainly some additional open shelters, and bringing in natural play, or kind of maybe a natural themed playground would be one option here too. Is just kind of bring that character in. Boys and Girls Club was in attendance at the stakeholder meeting and was very interested in, and intend to use the space, so being able to provide that same kind of amenities. They're maintaining the kind of footprint of the existing playground, but proposing that next round, maybe you look at something that's a little bit more accessible and formalized, and then mixing in some natural play, warming house, and other features if skating is still a viable piece on the mill pond to get out there. But also could start to look at more inland skating too, and then different options to flood different parts, grade the park in a way that...
Yeah, we have an area downtown that we currently do.
Yeah. So, this is whatever level of importance that has for the community, putting that level of resource into that. It'd be great to utilize the lake when you can, but it's like most of the areas, and by us, it becomes less and less common that you have quality ice to use on natural water. From the meeting, I think the biggest things that came up, I think, were some initial conversations on safety, vandalism, and surveillance, but not making the park feel like it's a prison or a used car lot either in that, but being strategic in placement of shelters, paths, and things, making sure vegetation is kept somewhat limbed up for visibility, but still creates shade, nice park character.
Selfridge has been our biggest problem for vandalism, just because of the layout.
Yeah. Yep. So, and it's one of the things, you improve access and level of amenities. You have more eyes there, tends to help reduce some of that as well. Things like the existing skate park components certainly could be left there until the park is developed, or permanently. So then we came up to as well, maybe, like you said, there was an interest in that area at one time. Maybe that still remains. I think as a formal investment in a more expansive skate park, Barlow makes more sense, but as kind of a side element with the things that are there now, and maintaining something like that, there's no reason it couldn't be, but isn't probably it wouldn't be a priority from a planning standpoint. And then more direct interaction with the water. So there was some discussion on beach and swimming access into the pond.
We had that once.
Possible.
We spent a lot of money on that one time, right off the point, when the state came through and lowered the water level so that they could dredge out the area down there when they were doing work. We actually put in a weed barrier, and then pea gravel on top of that, so that we would catch the motion of the water coming under the bridge, the train bridge, and then coming toward, so it would kind of keep that naturally clean. Mm-hmm. But it just never got much use.
I think it.
How do you like Selfridge? I love this, by the way.
Selfridge is
we need to do this.
A little path.
This is that neighborhood part that was always neglected, basically, and with the expansion of coming towards the south and utilizing that land that we have over there, will make it so much better.
Yeah, and creating that network, that this becomes extra connectivity for the neighborhood as well. I mean, that side of the park, I mean, it's not far away, but it seems kind of far forgotten. So lots of different ways to.
But the fishing here, the kayak launch, the waterfront trail, I think adding a few fishing nodes, a new playground there. The Boys and Girls Club is really interested in this. They use it multiple different ways, right in their backyard, and or whatever else you want to see there, but I think this is like what we need. This gets me excited.
We've been trying for a pier and a kayak launch for a decade to get in there, right? So we had a pier at one
We had a
time.
pier,
and then it
but
got
the city
right. So and
kept
then,
pulling it in and out every year to try to get it to last longer, and unfortunately, the last time they pulled it in, it didn't survive.
Yeah, the floats only last so many times being
Right.
pulled in and out of shore.
Yeah.
Permanent fixtures are possible but expensive and have their own issues too. So it is a balance, but looking at things, making sure there's wheels, making sure there's a place in the park that it can be set easily and
Yep.
not drug through the entire facility or having to be trucked off site. There are other things too to make that more feasible.
The handicap accessible fishing pier was used a lot, and that's something we definitely have to make sure we get back.
Yeah, and as you look at fishing nodes, I mean, certainly if there's anyone who does fish the area, those are the kind of people you want to, well, you might not give up their information if they really like fishing there, but as you place nodes and things, picking those locations, improvements that you can make underwater are limited to usually by DNR restrictions.
There's
But
been fishing cribs put out there in
They'll be
several
stocking
different
it
spots.
next year.
Yeah.
So
We had a winter project several years ago where we built the cribs on the ice, and then as it melted, everything just dropped in. And
any other questions or comments on Selfridge?
this should be park number one.
Yeah. Oh, and as part of this process, and I think that, I don't think we touched on it in the beginning, that's I think the other piece of what's important with this is identifying the community's priorities. I mean, a lot of this will come into phasing. And
Yep.
the dollar amounts at the end of the day are going to be big, but there's ways that it can be more digestible, and making sure if Selfridge is the most desired spot, making sure that those improvements are prioritized in capital budgeting or partnership development, things like that. Murray Park itself, we don't have a concept. We have the site plan from the senior center, because this was kind of brought in a little bit later in the process. It wasn't part of the original contract, but it became apparent through the survey and other comments that Adam received, particularly that
we needed to do something.
desire to address it. So we started to kind of consider that as well. I think the general layout and improvements, I don't think there's much of a desire or need to change location of the ball fields. Everything generally works that way. I think it's long-term considerations of parking improvements, maybe some additional parking or reformatting on other sides came up. Expansion of the trail network, which was the basis of was in the original senior center plan, and phasing that in over time to create those loops through the park that can be walking trails, running trails, maintenance trails, all that. I think some of the interesting things that came out of the discussions a couple of weeks ago, multi-generational activity in play, so being able to, I mean, things for the senior centers, the seniors to play with, or other generation. I mean, play doesn't have to be just for
Kids.
2 to 5 or 12-year-olds. I mean, it should be designed in a way that are engaging to adults and users of all abilities and ages as well. The more you can provide those types of things, the longer people are going to use the parks and stay engaged, come back, want to, or feel comfortable having their taxes be invested in the facilities. So there's different ways you can do that, whether it's some of the fitness activities and other pieces, or pickleball, yard games. There's a variety of different uses, even and sometimes outdoor court space that can be used for other types of fitness programming. So just an open space that can hold yoga classes or senior fitness or youth programming. There's lots of different ways to make multi-purpose space too, so you're not just creating a one-use piece.
The nice thing about Murray is it's got a lot of natural open green space. And if you spend time up there, you see a lot of people utilizing that. You talked about the ball tournaments and that. the teams up there will go and sit up on the hill in the park, get under the trees and that stuff. They like that natural aspect of it.
Will the soccer field still exist?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I don't know if there's anything that would, from what we've seen and heard, I don't think anything to be removed. If anything, maybe shuffled around a tiny bit for future uses, or repurpose some of the tennis court space or things like that. But
I think the most of the feedback was invest in the ball diamonds, you know, get that,
maintenance.
you know, the dugouts, the shelters, you know, the bleachers. Play areas around the athletic fields are a huge desire. And then, you know, connectivity, so trail connectivity, keeping, because the trail comes in now, finishing that off and looping it around, restoring the disc golf course. And then, you know, that front side of the park, you know, needs updating as well. So what do you put there? So, people also talk about a splash pad or some sort of splash feature, which certainly there's another splash pad in the community, but this would likely be something much smaller and just, you know, little geysers and things, because it just is another, close to the ball diamonds, it's another thing that families can use when one kid is playing baseball. If you have two other kids, they're running all the way across the park, and people just don't feel comfortable with that anymore. So, you know, I think that's the overall concept. So, you know, there's obviously also a workout facility or workout concept as well, or fitness station, and in there, we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's something too that people had talked a little bit about, is where do we incorporate maybe something like that. And this being a trailhead in a senior center area, it kind of makes sense to maybe put that somewhere up there. I don't know how much the tennis courts and the basketball courts get used up there anymore. I mean, they're shot, so
People are still going up there and using, yeah, they really are. And like I said, but it's because of the condition of them. I think they're not used as much, but families, like I said, I saw a family over there try and play tennis and pickleball the other day around everything. And then, you know, a lot of families just like the open space with their kids, and they ride the bikes around.
Yep.
And I see a lot of that. But a concern is the green space, like you were saying there, not to lose so much of it, because I so many people walk through that park or ride their bikes, and it's really about the green space that we have there that we enjoy.
So, and I think so we'll have to manage that from not adding too much, but it's a tough one because,
Well, you were talking about fitness,
yeah,
one of those stages type things. That's something that could be added along the existing walking trail that's through there. That was just the first half that's there. The other half was to come up towards the shelter house and that up on the hill. So, you know, that could be added along the walking trail with fitness stations off on the sides of those. Yeah. So you're not taking too much green space away.
Yeah, Oshkosh is a great example of that in Menominee Park, where they've installed a walking trail, and it's all brand new equipment. It looks phenomenal, and it's not a location that the outdoor workout equipment is, but more so it's one station here along a trail.
Yep.
That seems to get used well.
Exactly.
That's what I'm looking for, more natural
Yep.
along the way.
yeah, and the fitness court is something new, and we can talk about that, but it's kind of a condensed version of that, a 30 by 30 with a studio side of it as well, where you can have another 35 by 30 square and have classes. So it's a completely different concept on the trail. Instead of having little pocket parks where you stop and do exercise, it's a condensed,
One
packed
area.
in one area, which, I mean, you can do it both ways, but,
There's an aerobic group right now that utilizes Barlow, one of the tennis courts or basketball courts up there for aerobics in the morning.
Yeah.
So I see them when I'm up there working on the fields in the morning.
I've seen a couple of the gyms in our area will You'll see people running around, park trails,
Yep.
and go back, do a circuit. So being able to utilize some of that, so that you're utilizing some of the natural assets of the facilities or ways to tie that in. So
Yeah, the only thing with tennis up there, and when I lived up on Melanie Lane for years, is them winds up at Murray Park make it so tough. For playing basketball even, you put it up and the balls, tennis is another one. That's why I think the tennis courts didn't get as much use for tennis, where they could go to the high school or the college on Thorn Street at the time, and it was protected by the winds more. And, do you agree that that's kind of
Yeah,
the winds were?
I know the basketball courts still are being used a lot depending on the season and the sport, but the kids, I'm thinking about the age that really play basketball, that they come up there and,
I see a lot of the older kids going behind Murray Park on the basketball court back there, because it is kind of blocked in by the school and that from the west.
Lost a lot of trees in there too. Did that affect it?
somewhat, yeah.
I think there was some comments too on looking at some of the space around Murray Park for potential either acquisition or partnerships for expanded parking or other amenities too. So that'd be one way to look at that.
To the east, there's some land there that could be acquired.
Yep.
Yep.
An opportunity to pretty much keep the park how it is, but provide another opportunity for
Yeah, because
expanded
for
parking.
years, that section to the east of the road there was used for parking, for ball games, tournaments, and that aspect, so that could fit into the parking lot expansion.
But, and I think with the stakeholder comments, the big things were kind of fix what we have first before you add more. And I think that kind of fits with the general intent of what we've seen through the survey and other pieces with Murray in particular is don't really need anything more. We just need to improve what's there and maintain it
Yep.
in the future.
I umpire the youth tournaments up there and that, and, you know, people from out of town love the facility because it's in a park and the way it's laid out and that. The biggest complaint is parking, you know, lack of parking, so. I mean, you get 20 teams in for a weekend. It's a lot of bodies.
Space. And I mean, the other piece to consider too, the more parking you add in today's environment means more stormwater management and things like that too, so it's balancing too. If you're able to keep it as green space, that's
Yep.
flex for parking.
Which is nice.
Having to put in either retention ponds or underground storage, which gets extremely expensive, or just takes up all your green space. And
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, you know, that spot down there by the ball fields on the east side of the road going down in there, for years, the city used to mow that because they had an agreement with the landowner. And they mowed it, and that's what it was just natural parking. But that's changed the last couple of years with new ownership on that other side, so.
anything else from Murray Park? So for Ceresco and Horner, just given the time we had, we didn't present these to the stakeholder group. I think for Ceresco, they're kind of a similar, I think, overall approach to this Murray is it's improvement of what's there rather than a complete re-envisioning of what the space is. So improvements to parking to provide ADA parking stalls on the north side, maintaining and upgrading the shelter, adding in a connected network of paths so you have a variety of ways to utilize the space but also promote ADA accessibility. Also great for strollers and wagons and whatever else you're dragging around. Looking at potential for full court basketball would fit if that's desired, and then upgrading the playground equipment. Looking at maintenance of the existing trees, potentially starting a kind of a succession plan. Trees don't live forever.
And there's a lot of older trees down in that area.
So
Looks like there's some dead ash too.
Yeah, so starting to plan that, and that would go through, I mean, really is an overall park plan piece, and something to go into all of these is start now to build build that forest canopy, because trees take 15 years before you really get any decent shade out of them. But I think this park is an important community asset, seems well used for what it is. So just making those upgrades that just make it more usable, and then maintaining that.
We found a big usage growth in Ceresco Park after they sold off the old Ceresco School, which was a block away. That used to be a huge green space that everybody used, and when the school system sold that off, everybody started going to Ceresco Park, and it needs some TLC.
Any other questions or comments for Ceresco?
Pretty simple park.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the full basketball court there. A thought just to throw out there would be doing just a half basketball court, but the other half, make it like a multi-purpose court, you know, where they could do pickleball or
Yeah.
that type of stuff.
I don't remember if that comment came up. No, it did come up at the stakeholder meeting. I know we've seen a lot of that recently. That seems to be a trend, particularly in neighborhood parks where you only have room for a single court, whether it's basketball, tennis, pickleball, foursquare. And we've seen quite a bit of that where they're either set up as tennis with kind of half-court basketball on both sides, or different ways of doing that. You could have half-court basketball permanently on one side and the other side be more multi-purpose. So certainly, I think as we label that's probably more appropriate way to say that, but we can kind of show that too. Good comment.
Great idea, because the reality of getting 10 guys to play a full court
Down
pickup
there?
game at a park is,
They go up to Barlow to
Yeah.
play. That's where everybody congregates to play basketball.
Yeah.
So keeping it as a half
More
a
3-on-3.
court down there with-
exactly, yeah. Yep.
Horner, unique little park. Probably most people probably don't even think of it as a park, just as a space between the different areas. I think looking back at some of the concepts and comments that we heard, I think utilizing it, passive space, access, and focus on the water. So part of what goes into this will be playing along and seeing what comes out of some of the bridge removal plans and what that looks like a little bit further, how far the abutments come back, what does that look like, and what does that cross section look like. We heard comments of replacing the existing kind of span with some type of covered bridge or something in that character. Certainly at different levels as possible. You can go from a simple boardwalk type bridge you see in state parks or along most of the trails. It could be something with a little bit more character to it, or different types of span types and arches that can go on there. It was really desired and became kind of a central focal point. You could do something like a faux covered bridge.
Well, that, one of the reasons we threw out John Split and I threw out the covered bridge aspect is to keep the character of that area, but also to give a pavilion type situation for people to get out of the bad weather. Because right now, it starts raining, you run like heck, you know, and it does get used a lot more now since the road's been taken out.
Yeah, with the abandonment of that right of way on the east side, I think the focus would be bringing the trail network kind of down along the water as much as possible, and seeing how that ties into future improvements, whether it's restoration of that waterway and creating a more natural water flow in different ways if that's accomplished. We have a small kind of water feature type central focal point element just to create a backdrop. Again, that would be probably something more in the scale of a few jets or geysers on the ground, or a small stone or bubbling feature, something like that. Not a full splash pad or anything like that, just to create a focal point. Some seating, things like that around there, or gazebo, small place that just becomes a nice little picture point or kind of rest stop in the community.
Nice quiet area.
The overall intent, I think, behind the improvements that can go in there. So,
Everybody love Horner Park.
It's a clean slate.
I think paths and connectivity is the biggest thing there,
Right.
so, to begin with, but we'll be ripping into that area anyway next year if we remove the bridge, so it's gonna be kind of a work in progress too, just because, like you said, we could lose some park area, just grading it back, so.
As long as we got a spot for a couple of trees for Adam's hammock, we're good to go.
Yep, we gotta put hammocks out there.
it wasn't something we directly talked about, but it isn't a
Hammock
terrible thing.
Park, yep.
Hammock, and we've seen that done, whether it's putting some strategically placed posts, trees. Trees are hard because you start off with
Yeah.
2-inch trees. Don't really want to be hanging a hammock on those for a couple of years. But that is something we've seen in urban parks.
Yep.
It's become cool again, or cool. So it's certainly something that can be integrated too in a certain space. Some place like this is a good spot for it. You go down, sit by the water, listen to that, relax, read a book,
Yep.
listen to a podcast in the background. I mean, there's paint, and there's all kinds of different
Yep.
these kind of passive spaces. That is the last of what we have.
That's it, yeah, so if you have any other feedback, let us know. We're open to anything and we'll continue to move on and formalize some more stuff and then bring it back one more time and hold a public meeting and,
Yeah, so I think the general schedule would be we'll come back to another meeting, this group to kind of present more,
Concrete change.
yeah, more concrete concepts, some rough cost estimates, kind of get some feedback on that. Then would be a public meeting as part of the schedule, so getting general public feedback. And that can be tied into some different opportunities for online surveys and things for outreach for those who maybe can't come to a meeting, things like that. Get some more community buy-in and interest, sharing some of that feedback with stakeholder groups as well to keep them kind of updated in the project and hopefully engaged. Things like working with the school seem like a viable option and certainly a good way to cost share some of those improvements and benefit both groups. So hopefully that can continue for some of the others like the Boys and Girls Club and others. I don't know if you mentioned, but the PD had a couple representatives here as well.
Yep.
Police department, so them engaged and aware of some of the potential plans. So with that's all I have. I appreciate everyone's time and comments. It was
all right? Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Not much we've pretty much done a lot of updates. So, do you have anything to report, Adam?
Oh, no, we got more on
We
the
got items on the
agenda.
agenda, but under discussion items.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't grab mine. All right, Recreation Director position and department.
So, okay, so I wanted to bring this forward as a concept or an idea to the Parks and Rec Committee. So we're going through this park master planning. We've surveyed the public. There is a strong desire for us to better manage and put programming in our park system. To accomplish that is to take some effort. And the way we kind of currently handle parks, Mike Ehrenberg, the Public Works Director, and the Public Works Department as a group sort of manage the parks and maintain the parks. Frankly, the condition of everything, how that it gets prioritized, is a significant concern to me, because we aren't keeping up and we aren't using the parks and advocating for the parks So this whole process has led me to discussions regarding creating a Parks and Rec Director position for the city of Ripon for the first time in many, many, many years, and a sort of department that is housed out of the Senior Activity Center. That would be the location of it. They would take on the management of the parks and coordinate maintenance of the parks within their department and the Public Works Department. There is a job description, there is a budget, there is a wage salary. This would be a full-time position. This individual, if we happen to move forward with this, would be responsible for programming in the parks. That would be programming from everybody that's little to everybody that's big. They would be responsible for managing the parks from the standpoint of being the eyes in the parks every day. Scheduling the parks and communicating with the community regarding when there are events, when there needs to be maintenance done, because right now, frankly, the city is getting no communication and we're getting left out to hang a lot of times, where we're getting secondhand schedules and we're not even mowing the fields ahead of, so
Events.
it's events. It's a big problem. They would help with grants, implementation of this plan, and it's a significant cost of a budget, about $157,000, including wages and benefits, and then I would say about $30,000 to $40,000 to put on programming equipment, things of that nature. This is starting it from the ground up. This is an idea. It's an idea I shared with the stakeholders that people are very excited about. If we did move forward with it as a city, we would have to prioritize it in the 2023 budget. But I don't know if we can get serious about doing what we need to do in our parks without adding more advocacy and a position to take this on. Myself and the Public Works Department can only do so much, and the Public Works Department is dealing with not just parks, but cemeteries, trees, right-of-ways, utilities,
Streets.
facilities. It's way too much. And pulling this out, I think, is really important, and why it's in front of you today. That is my sales pitch on it. It's up to you all to sort of, as a group, because this individual would sort of become, like, if those have been on the board more recently, Mike Ehrenberg, Public Works Director, would generally be here. He's on vacation, but Public Works Director would no longer be a part of this. This would be a park-focused, and I think it would allow this group too, as a committee, to really dive deeper into projects and programming and priorities, and just take it to a level that we haven't done for a very, very long time, if ever. It's not meant to step on anybody's toes. It's not meant to take over youth baseball. It's not meant to take over youth programming. It's meant to put together, be the conduit, as well as fill in gaps and put together, comprehensive community programming in booklets and online. So when people move here, if they're young or old, they know what activities are going on. So it'd be housed at the Senior Activity Center. There's 2 offices up there. They would also have a component of overseeing that facility and the Senior Activity Center, and would work hand in hand with that. And then, utilize that space in a way that I think people kind of maybe intended it for, but frankly, expand that. So if you have to go get a park shelter rental, that's where you go to do that. Currently, you go down to the Public Works building. So this would be a significant investment in the management of our parks, and one that, we would have to follow through on a budget. So I wanted to put this out there and see what you all think.
I think it's a great idea. Did you research other cities our size to see how many have a separate park?
So you see there's a wage study here. So,
Yep.
these are communities that have that dedicated position. Wapaka, Merrill, Shawano, New London, Reedsburg, Ashland, Milton, McFarland, Prairie du Chien, Berlin, and Antigo, Rhinelander. Maybe Dan can speak to it just in his Parks and Rec experience. Communities our size generally have something.
And we used to. I mean, as an old fart here, we used to have a full-time park and rec director for years. He was in charge of organizing the youth baseball, softball program, the youth basketball programs, the youth wrestling club, all of those were all through there. He used to turn around and take care of oversee the maintenance of the fields and all that, taking that so that
What
the
happened to
public, well, it got to a point where, no, individual clubs were being formed and taking those activities away from the city. We used to have a great, what was called playground program during the summer in the mornings. It would start at 9 in the morning and go until 11:30. And it was held up at Barlow Park. There was crafts up there, there was archery, there was tennis instructions. You'd turn around and once a week they would do a golf lesson where they would take a vehicle over to Tuscumbia, and the kids were taught that aspect. Then there was just open games like, bat ball and horseshoes and all that type of stuff. And that was all good. Then the school system started having more summer school in the mornings, so they were losing people coming to that program. With the thing of getting back to a full-time, we then dropped to a part-time full rec director to kind of act as a mediator between some of these clubs and that stuff and help out with things. And that ended up getting deleted because it just was not a necessity anymore. So, if we're going to go this path, which I'm in favor of, we need to turn around and start make it worthwhile for that individual to be in that position.
Yeah, there's no doing this part-time. I don't think.
No. It's got to be both feet in or not at all.
Some of these are bigger
Yeah.
cities.
Yeah.
I mean, Neenah, I work in Neenah, they have a park and rec department with like probably 3 full-time staff plus a ton of part-time, so.
Yep.
So on this list, the average population is 7447. So I mean, that is right in our wheelhouse, and so there are smaller communities that have big parks and rec departments. They've prioritized it, they're doing tons.
Right.
And then there are bigger communities that don't have really a big one, but they have like an aquatic center that they have to manage, so they're kind of forced into it.
Right.
So, I mean, Dan can maybe speak to what he sees in other communities, but I think in our size, we are very, it's kind of unheard of that we don't have something.
Yeah, and we'll see it utilized in different ways. I mean, departments are anything from park rec and forestry. Some are just parks, so they'll have separate rec directors or rec programming depending on what the school districts and other groups have, so that you're not duplicating some of those services, that it's more sustainable. That role tends to be an advocate too, and in a lot of cases we'll work on grant writing, funding, the budgeting part of the parks, and the maintenance piece that is important as well to maintain all these pieces. Whether sometimes the staff that does the actual maintenance is still under public works or other things, but then there's that advocate that's out there looking for different opportunities to engage the community and maintain those facilities.
Like even somebody just knowing that the toilet works before we have a tournament starting is important.
Definitely.
Like but that's
Seriously, I get phone calls.
That's where we're at, and so what I'm looking for here is if this is something you guys would like to support, or this committee we would forward it to as a priority in the budget and ask the council to fund the position and the programs. Some of this is a guess based on overall budget. We're just kind of throwing money. I did requests and I received budgets from like Reedsburg and I think 3 other communities around our size to see what they're spending on Parks and Rec. And I tried to kind of keep it in line there, but a lot of those places have like an aquatic center, so their budget's $550,000 and it's all aquatic. So
How many of those communities run the youth programs, like, you know, the baseball, the basketball?
I think it's a mix.
Is
It's
it?
really a mix at this point. And this by no means is an intention to take on those. At
Right.
the same time, you know, you're only a group of parents away from not having that anymore, you know, and that's the fact. So, you know, we're not equipped right now to take that on, but, you know, it could be
It may
something
come that day.
that could come to a day where we have to. Like I said, I've met with the Boys and Girls Club just the other day. You know, they have a space, they're coming to town, building out a center. They don't want to see us all of a sudden get into tons and tons of youth programming. If they're gonna, and we understand that, that's, you know, but there's a whole gap. There's a whole, you know, gap
There's a void.
of we have a senior center and we have a Boys and Girls Club. I'm not saying what about Adam, but I'm saying, like, what about
That middle-aged group.
yeah, I mean, we can put programming on there. There's so many opportunities. And I don't know what success is in this realm. If it's, we figure this out and we get grants and we can do projects, great. If it's, we do 12 programs next year, you know, if that's it, I don't know. But it's going to be sort of a gamble here on how this all pans out, or you know, a wait and see. We have to find the right person as well, because this position is going to be, it's going to be tough. I mean, this is getting the keys to an unbuilt house, like, or castle. Like, it's going to be tough. But I just think where we're at now, if we don't make this investment, doing things like master planning really aren't. It's just, it's fun. It's just, it's magic. It's just, oh, we did that. Without having somebody on with the foot on the gas pedal, I think we'll continue to just sort of stumble, and do things mediocre. And we need to get way better at parks. And this is a significant investment. We have like little part-time budget in there too. You know, talking to the college, just, they're like, hey, our number one and number two, like, majors are exercise science and sports management. You know, there's opportunities to work with the college. We have the Wilmore Center, we have the school district, we have amenities that we aren't using as a community. And how can we bring everybody together? And nobody's really doing that in this position. I would hope would bring that all together. So that's my pitch. That's, it's up to you all if you want to recommend it. It's a big ask in the budget, but I feel like if you guys want it and the council wants it, I will find a way to put it in the budget.
This master plan doesn't happen successfully without this position, I think. Right. It's the step that needs to happen before we get this moving, for sure, I think. So you got to find a unicorn to come into this position, because they're gonna, like you said, man, you're setting yourself up to just be hit all the time. But yeah, I'm good with it.
Do we need a motion?
Sure.
I will move that we forward this to council.
Is there a second?
I will second. Go ahead.
I'll second.
Sandy.
Sandy seconds it. Any other discussion on it? If not, all in favor of forwarding the motion to council, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It will be forwarded.
All right. Thank you. I was nervous about that one.
All right, National Fitness Campaign Grant.
We just
Kind of ties in, huh?
Yep, so so we had talked a little bit about this in the master plan. There's what's called the National Fitness Campaign. They offer fitness courts. They're 30 by 30 courts. They are expanding into Wisconsin with grants through Courts, which is like a healthcare or health insurance provider. I contacted them because I just thought this concept was a unique one, that there's only like 2 or 3 of them in the state of Wisconsin. So we had talked a little bit about, you know, the trail concept of working out. This is more of a condensed 30 by 30 fitness court, and basically there are 7 core movements, and they have apps, and you download them and you go and you do exercises, and they're really motivated to come into Wisconsin and build these out. So in talking to them, they have a grant that we can apply for to get like up to $50,000 toward a fitness court. They are expensive. It just would depend on how how much more we would go. But to qualify for the 50,000, you know, we'd be looking at probably another $125,000 to match to get one. So we would have to either fundraise or figure out a way. But if this is a priority, or if this is a goal to install something like this in the community, there's a video, you can watch it how it works. It's really cool. It really just kind of is, from a standpoint of, you can also add another 30 by 30 area and have a studio, so the people that are doing yoga or you know, anything outside can do a class on a court versus just under, you know, a shelter or whatever, under on the basketball court. The closest one is in Juneau. They have one. Other than that, I believe Madison and Milwaukee. But it's just a unique idea, and before I waste any more time on it, I wanted to make sure that it's something that some people would be interested in doing. If not, I can totally scrap the idea.
It's smart for us to look at. It doesn't hurt, right? I mean, there's a big price tag at the end of it, I understand that, but there's opportunities, I think.
So, and part of the conversation too, through all of this, was talking to the hospital, and they have a path out by their facility, and they had talked about putting in that fitness path concept at their hospital. Sorry, but that's awesome, but it's not accessible. It's
out there.
That needs to be, those things need to be in the city and in our parks. So that kind of turned my eye onto this, just kind of randomly. And the whole difference is each one of those little like parks that you put in is like 7 to 10 grand. So you're spending a lot for that whole thing too. Versus this, you know, you can go up, download an app, run through a 7 or 15 or 20 minute workout, and depending on where we put it, they like the idea of putting it next to trails, and we have trail connectivity. They like putting it next to senior centers and other centers like that. So they like the concept. So if I'm going to waste any more time on it, I just need to know if I should or shouldn't. If there's if there's any support for this kind of idea, we can apply for it and then see if we get qualified, and then go from there too. I'm happy to do that, but you know, it's kind of a unique thing. So.
I think it's very unique. However, I could also see like stay-at-home moms using it if it's next to a park. You know, the kids are playing at the park, they're getting their workout in quick, they're right there. I don't know.
That was my thought as well. It wouldn't make much sense to put it next to the senior center if you have the app connection. I don't know anything about it, but I would do it if I was a stay-at-home mom with the kids playing at the park. I think that would be more practical.
Might look really good in front of the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
But
So
Would you be looking more at Murray Park? Is that where you're kind of leaning, or?
they want it, in their concept, they like it connected to trails, so somebody can literally go on a trail, stop here, and then like work out and then go back on the trail for a bike ride, for a walk, for a run. You know, they like that concept. They like it centrally located. So I mean, I think they're open to it, but they want exposure. You know, they're not, in terms of grants and competitiveness in this, they're coming into Wisconsin offering grants to get these out there. They're not, there's only like 10. So I mean, they're gonna pick the communities that they want to do this in, and they like Ripon, they like Murray Park from the standpoint of trail connectivity and having a senior center there, or an community activity center, whatever you want to call it at this point. If we put a Parks and Rec director up there, it's going to be the Parks and Rec department too now. So
The nice thing with Murray is we could put it over where the tennis courts that aren't used right now. So you're taking another section of the park and revitalizing that to get some use out of it. There's a shelter house there. There's playground equipment right there behind the tennis court area. That might be a viable park. We had in our plans to bring the walking trail up the hill towards the existing shelter facility there and then come around. So there's your connectability to trail. That would seem to be the more practical spot to put it, because then you're not tearing up another green spot. Put down
At a
some
very
more
small
concrete.
level, it's 30 by 30, so
Yeah.
I think this room is 30, so it's not huge.
Right.
I mean, it's.
That's why I say, where
it's
where
not-
the existing
but
tennis court is,
You don't want to lose the tennis, if we want to replace the tennis, I think if we go for this, we figure
Well,
out where we put it later.
tennis court, you could take half a tennis court and make a pickleball court.
Yeah.
I think that would get more use up there than a tennis court,
With seniors, yes.
you know? So you could have that
Oh, that's-
and the pickleball court in that
Fastest
same
rising
area,
sport is
Yes,
pickleball.
yes.
you know?
I still think we need to take a look at it. We'll find a place to go with it, right? I mean, I would think.
All right, if you all want me to proceed, I will proceed.
Please proceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Review of capital improvement plan. And it's,
So I threw this in here just quick for the budget. The priorities for 2023, obviously doing master planning into like a budget time, it's going to be impossible. We're not going to have like this all done, but we still need to continue to invest in things. So the project's priority for 2023 would be the loop or the trail connection and paving in Murray Park. Looking at if we can incorporate some of the Horner Park improvements into the bridge project or bridge removal, because we're going to be there anyway. I think that makes some sense. And then really start looking at replacing dugouts and making improvements in Murray Park quads. We're going to need some partnerships there. We did have a meeting with a company called Keeper Goals that does like a ton of ball diamonds, like rehabs. They sell, you know, everything from, you know, press boxes to dugout shelters and shade structures. They came through and you know, just a standard prefab, you know, like with a concrete poured dugout, like with just a lean-to looking thing, is like $25,000
per dugout,
per field.
field.
It's like 12 grand per. So netting is another 100K. I do have on here Murray Park tennis court or replacement, or the fitness court as a 2024 project. If we went for the grant and got it, we'd have to figure that out. And then moving forward, just bleacher improvements at Murray Park. To put shade over the bleachers is $55,000. That's from Keeper Goals. That's an actual quote. And then
Is that like a steel type?
yeah, that's like
Is that what they're looking at?
It's like it's called a bleacher defender, and it like because it would replace the current fence defender
Right.
that's up there, right? They're expensive, but
That would be the whole unit. That would be taking down the piping that's there.
They'd put
and
like
putting
a-
up a whole new unit.
a whole, yep, it'd be like a structure that leans over and creates shade with like a fabric-y like type
Material.
to create shade and protection. That's just an option,
Right.
but I mean those are pricey too. I mean these are just options that they sell. There are other vendors. We'll have to price out things too eventually, but that's just like, we got to get this stuff on the board at some point. Then, you know, 2025, looking at a big project probably in Selfridge, hopefully sooner if we get grants. And then looking at, beyond that, backstop and netting for ball diamonds, you're looking at 125 grand. And then looking at also in the future doing playground expansion with the school. So these are kind of the main priorities, just based on the conversations, based on the things. 2023 would really be priority of the Mascoutin and Murray Park Trail
Can I
completion.
ask, what does this involve?
What's that?
On the trail, what,
Oh, what would that project be?
yeah, what is that project?
So the project would be paving the recently installed portion of the trail from the senior center out to the kind of the roadway there,
Okay.
and then paving it as well along the
So instead of
driveway?
all the heavy gravel there.
It would be
it's-
blacktop like we have
Okay.
between Ripon and Green
People have
Lake.
talked to me and asked me about that because it's
Yep.
difficult to ride bikes.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So pave it, and then the loop of the trail that I think Howard installed at one point, we would refinish that. We had bid that out, and we would we would not go with pavement through the entire thing at this point, but get it out there as a limestone or something.
Yeah, it's currently lime chip
Yep.
is what's there.
So just rehab that and finish that connection out back toward where we're connecting to the quads from the senior center. So it's probably more than $75,000, but that's just the number I have right now.
Has anything been looked at with the connection of the bike trail coming through and exiting the west side of the park? That been looked at?
That
You have that
that
easement
was
through
that was a
there?
very expensive project
Yes.
that we will defer to the Parks and Rec director to figure out.
Good luck.
Don't tell the person
No.
hired.
I think that's sort of been abandoned for the standpoint that is when we plan that out, that was like $100,000 to make a connection across the 100 feet. And it was a big project because there's drainage and a whole bunch of issues there.
Because currently, right now, the trail that we have going down that way, bike-wise, is null and void. Which bikers will figure things out with signage and that, but to complete coming around, that eventually is gonna have to have some way to get from there to the northwest.
So like, and this brings up a point, like one of the feedback was connectivity of bike trails, you know, and routes. I think that is a project that somebody like a Parks and Rec director is gonna have to take on. Like, how do we get from the Northwestern to the Mascoutin without that sort of connection? And I think that's stuff we can work through, but we're gonna have to make those investments and connections, so, yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah, that would be the priority.
Seeing we were talking bike trail, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yep. That's kind of the priority. I would just say it's a work in progress, so, because of the master planning thing, so.
A lot of stuff going on at one time.
And we don't have tons of money to throw at parks quite yet. No. Especially if we're adding 100, yeah.
I know, I'm with a group that just spent $650,000, so. Anything else on capital improvement, Adam?
Nope.
Good? All right. Project and updates,
Nope.
nothing there, 'cause Mike being gone and that. Suggestions for the agenda for the next meeting, contact Adam or myself. Do we want to meet again this month? Because we
Probably next
traditionally meet
month.
towards the end of the month. What's MSA's thought?
Potentially be ready towards the end of the month, otherwise October would definitely.
October. We'll do October.
Just change it over to the October? That date to be determined yet?
Yep. I'll try to make sure everybody can make it.
Oh.
If there's a day that works better,
And it will also depend on what you guys come up with, if you've got everything.
and when Dan can get here.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Anyone have anything else? Otherwise, I'll obtain a motion to adjourn.
Well, I suppose, sure. So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's made and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you all. This was a long one. Sorry. It was a lot.
There's a lot
For your
going
first
on
one.
right now.
Sorry.
It's good.